Today's guest is Dr. Rachel Knox. I'm so excited to have her on the show today. She is the co-founder of the American Cannabinoid Clinics and Advent Academy. She is also a cannabis medicine specialist and a Dr. Knox, please school me and us how to say this word. You are an endocannabinologist.
You did it. Yes.
You guys have no idea how many times I tried to say that word. Oh my goodness. Okay, so can you tell us what is an endocannabinologist?
Yeah, so endocannabinology is the field of medicine that I'm very passionate about. It is the study of the function and dysfunction of the endocannabinoid system. So like any ology out there, cardiology, gastroenterology, otolaryngology, like all these ologies, the ology, the study of the endocannabinoid system, creates what I do, endocannabinology. So I'm an endocannabinologist, and really more broadly speaking, you can call me a cannabinologist, right? So cannabinology, another new word, is the branch of science, physiology, and medicine that concerns itself with the endocannabinoid system and the things that work on that system, like cannabis, right? Other exogenous botanicals or substances that work on that system, but also what we call, another fancy word here, cannabimimetic agents or modalities like yoga or acupuncture, activities that also modulate the endocannabinoid system. And that system, and we're going to get into it, is what controls every other physiologic process in the body. It keeps us in balance. And when we put stress on that system, we can get into dysfunction. So yes, I nerd out over the endocannabinoid system as it relates to all sorts of disease processes. And in our clinics, we believe that, the correction of this system is the most important component to helping people manage or even reverse their disease processes. So that's what I am, an endocannabinologist.
So before we go into more details about that, you and your family, you guys have an amazing story. Can you tell us a little bit about you guys' story? For medical doctors, how did you guys get into the cannabis business?
Oh gosh, I mean, we like to say cannabis found us. It starts with my mom. She many years ago now, retired anesthesiologist, got approached by a clinic here in Portland where people have been writing for cannabis cards for decades, right? We legalized in 1998, the medical cannabis program here. And so patients could go to a doctor, get approved for use, apply to the state, and get a card in the mail, and have the ability to walk into a retail or a dispensary to pick up their medicine. And so this particular clinic ran out of doctors. I don't know a backstory there, but my mom was solicited to come help out. And, very ironically, she is a woman of the Bay Area, born and raised in San Francisco, Richmond, went to Cal, Berkeley, of all places, in the late 60s, early 70s, and had never smelt or tasted cannabis, she claimed, and unfortunately was a victim of propaganda and believed that cannabis was a drug of abuse. She saw colleagues going in and out of, rehab and probation for the use of cannabis. And so when she was asked to work at this office, she was like, no. But had an offhand conversation with my brother, who is actually an attorney in the Bay Area. And, medical cannabis legalized in California first in 1996. And he had a lot of clients in the industry, and basically told my mom, look, cannabis is medicine. It's a medicine here. It's actually a medicine in Oregon. You should give that a second thought, maybe a second look, and go check it out. And so she did. And she was fascinated by her experience. The folks coming into those clinics weren't potheads, right? They were grandmas and grandpas, and they were retired business people, retired professionals. They were parents with children suffering from diseases. These were people who had failed conventional therapies or had been tossed aside from conventional medicine with nothing else they could offer them. And they started asking her questions, right? And we're not taught about the endocannabinoid system. We're definitely not taught about cannabis. And so she started studying it. And at this time, my sister and I were in residency, and she would tell us these stories of the clinic and what she was getting into. And it fascinated us because both of us, my sister and I, sort of had this weird relationship with conventional medicine, really felt like we weren't getting the tools that we knew we would require to help people heal.
Yeah.
When you have patients asking you, the doctor, well, how do I change my nutritional intake? And I don't know because I wasn't taught that. I'm missing the whole foundation of health. I don't have information that to provide patients that has everything to do with their foundation. So we were already struggling with what are we going to do once we graduate from residency, myself in family medicine and my sister in preventive medicine. And my dad was sort of in the background, just following along with my mom. But by the time we were out of residency and I had moved back home, coming back home from North Carolina, I had no idea what was waiting for me. I had no idea whatsoever because North Carolina, very conservative state. I had asked my attendings, about this marijuana thing, like in Oregon, it's really popular. And I got the same old response, there's not enough evidence, like it's still a drug of abuse, et cetera. But when I came home and started working in the card clinics as well, just to get some experience and exposure, I too was floored. Yeah. And when I wasn't able to answer patients' questions about just simple aspects of using cannabis as a medicine, I started studying too. And I think that's the same story for each one of us. We just were fascinated by what we uncovered from the history of cannabis as a medicine since 2737 BC to the intentional prohibition that was rooted in politics and big business and racism, which absolutely was not founded in science. Right? There was no science that proved that cannabis was a dangerous substance at the time of prohibition. In fact, cannabis made up 50% of the prescriptions doctors in the United States actively prescribed. But when the media started demonizing this thing called marijuana, doctors had no idea that marijuana was the same thing as cannabis, right? So they were sort of bamboozled and, left out of the conversation, probably intentionally, because I'm sure you would have seen the medical arms, raising up in prohibition to their prohibition. Yeah. Anyway, we know what happened. And, the devastation of the war on drugs, when Nixon declared that we needed to have an all out affront against drugs, which included cannabis. And, unbeknownst to all of us, there was research going on in Israel funded by the United States starting in the 1960s this whole time, right? And so fascinated, enraged. What else did I feel? I felt lied to.
Yeah.
The endocannabinoid system was discovered in, between 1988 and 1995. In that very short period of time, they discovered the endocannabinoid system and all the parts, of it and how it worked. They knew what it did. And I graduated from medical school in 2012. Over 20 years later, was not taught about this fascinating system that runs everything else. I learned about all the other physiologic systems. Why didn't I learn about this system that controls them all? It makes no sense. So I think for all of us, we felt very impassioned, and the information helped empower us into really doing, yes, advocacy work, but sort of it's not that directly. I think it's secondary advocacy, because primarily we want to provide a good service to patients who are looking for alternatives right now. When 1 in 2 Americans are suffering from a chronic disease and conventional medicine isn't helping them heal, nobody wants to be sick. Everybody wants to get better again. Nobody wants to manage their chronic disease the rest of their life, right? Everybody wishes they could just get better and be normal, healthy, and happy again. Yeah. And I really do believe we have the tools on this earth to do so. So we want to tell the truth. We want to educate. We want to encourage people not to be afraid of a substance that has really been propagandized into negativity. And I think we're just truth seekers.
It's political when you break this down, because we all have. Well, I know I did, at least. I was like anti-cannabis, because of the idea that we have of it, right? We're not taught all of the benefits and everything like that. And it wasn't until I was diagnosed with cancer, I was like, oh, well, let me like be open-minded about this. Like,
Yeah.
what is this?
I mean, at that point, what do I have to lose, right? This is life and death. Like literally, it's life and death now.
Yep.
And I can understand most people want all the information. Just tell me more. What is going to work?
Yeah.
What's going to work?
Exactly. Exactly. So what is the endocannabinoid system? Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, very, very like high level and simply, the endocannabinoid system is a system inside of all vertebrate and invertebrate life. The only organism that doesn't have an endocannabinoid system is the insect that we know of. So it's this
Wow.
miraculous system really inside of every living creature that controls all the physiologic function. Its job is homeostasis. Homeostasis means in balance, internal balance. A healthy endocannabinoid system is highly adaptive, meaning that in response to external stressors or internal stressors like angst or negative thinking even, it responds and it puts us back into balance. It's its job to keep us in balance, right? And if you're perfectly balanced, hypothetically, you would have perfect health. But as you know, we live in the 21st century, and if you live in modern advancing societies, we are exposed to air pollution. We're exposed to heavy metals in our water. We're exposed to a lot of toxic thoughts, stresses relationally or in the workforce. We're exposed to fake food. We are constantly being affronted and accosted by things, right, both tangible and intangible, that put stress on that system, that can knock it out of balance and prevent it from restoring balance in a natural way or on its own. It's supposed to work without our intervention.
Wow.
But if you can imagine, we do so much to harm it, as resilient as our body is, which is why we can live to our 80s and 90s, most of us in nursing homes on a lot of drugs and not with a great quality of life. But that's a testament to how resilient the human body is.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we'd all be dead. We would all be dead.
That's a good look at that.
Yes.
About it like that.
Yeah. But like scientifically, right, it's a system that's made up of receptors and keys that fit into those receptors, which we call ligands. And the enzymes that create those ligands or ligands and that break them down again. And all of this is supposed to work in harmony on its own to keep us in balance.
So how do we restore then or maintain our system, whether it's to prevent a disease or trying to reverse a disease? How do we do that?
Yeah, so I like to look at the endocannabinoid system from two vantage points. Whether you're healthy or well or sick, you still have to promote a healthy system, right? So we're not talking about supplementation at this point. We're saying, okay, what are the building blocks of this system? How do I make sure I have enough of that so that it is maintained, right? It's like getting a tune-up. Like anything else, we need to be eating natural whole foods full of the minerals and nutrients, fatty acids, omegas, those sorts of things that are the building blocks to every cellular structure in our body, including the endocannabinoid system. I mean, the endocannabinoid system goes deep to the very cellular level. I mean, receptors of the endocannabinoid system sit on the mitochondria, which are, organelles inside your individual cells that are the engines of those cells, right? The endocannabinoid system goes that deeply. And so for the system to run well, you got to fuel your body well. You got to put what was meant for human consumption into that body, because that body needs to break down those substances into the minerals and nutrients that it needs to make new cells, right? So that is the substance of life. And the endocannabinoid system is the substance of life. So we have to do work on that end to make sure that system runs properly. So whether you're doing that or not, though, you can use exogenous, we call outside of the body, molecules, like cannabinoids, like those in cannabis, like CBD and THC, to supplement that system. And the reason they work is because THC, for example, mimics one of our ligands, a ligand that works on that system called anandamide. It's a mimicker. So if we're deficient in anandamide or 2-AG, which is another ligand of the endocannabinoid system, common sense says, well, we can supplement that with cannabinoids outside of the body. It's like taking, vitamin D, right? We're supposed to be able to make it on our own, but if we live in an area where we can't, we're out in the sun, often enough, we supplement that with vitamin D. And you can do the same thing with cannabinoids. And a lot of other things too, like I said cannabimimetic earlier. That sort of sounds like mimic too. So there are other herbs with, nutrients or chemical compounds that mimic the cannabinoids as well. And they do the similar things in our body. But it's all to support, supplement, tone. We like to use that word tone, like you're tuning up the endocannabinoid system, or correcting dysfunction by that two-pronged approach, right? Using supplement, adding exogenous components to the body, like a medicine, and lifestyle practices, proper nutrition, meditation, yoga, giving people a hug, running. A lot of people still believe, most people I'll say, believe that their runner's high comes from endorphins, adrenaline. It's actually not true. Really? The runner's high that we experience when we run or exercise is an endocannabinoid. It's anandamide. Ananda, meaning bliss in Sanskrit, is where that name comes from, because that's the blissful molecule in our body. It makes us happy. That is anandamide, not endorphins. So when you're running and you're having a good time, that's a cannabinoid, folks.
What?
Not an endorphin.
Wow. You are breaking me down because, see, again,
yes, the endocannabinoid system is alive and well at conception. Without the endocannabinoid system, we cannot reproduce. That embryo does not start to grow. The endocannabinoid system is literally with us from conception until death. It's the most important physiologic system that we have.
How do patients who, let's say that they are doing any type of conventional treatment, so say for instance me, when I was on chemotherapy, how, what do they do to help them, using cannabis or THC to help them with their treatments?
Yeah, so cancer is one of, you can have all sorts of cancers, right? So cancer is a very broad subject matter, but we have plenty of studies on cannabis and cancer. We also have studies, research studies on the endocannabinoid system in cancer. And what we see in a lot of cancers is an upregulation of cannabinoid receptors. So the receptors of the endocannabinoid system on the surface of those cancer cells. It's almost as though the cells are over-regulating or over creating these receptors because those receptors are needed. Now, if those receptors get a ligand attached to them, the endocannabinoid system actually destroys cancer cells. It induces apoptosis or programmed cell death. It prevents cancers from growing. It prevents cancers from making its own blood supply, which is called angiogenesis. And it prevents cancer from spreading, metastasis. But if you have an overproduction of cannabinoid receptors and not enough ligands to fit on those receptors and cause all of those corrective processes, then you have uncontrolled cancer growth, right? What studies have shown, and most of the studies have been on breast cancer, lung cancer, prostate cancer, lung and colon cancer, and brain tumors, glioblastomas, astrocytomas specifically. And what all of those studies show is anti-cancer properties from cannabinoids. So like I said, so anti-tumorigenesis. They're anti-cancer. They're anti-metastasis. They're angiogenesis, that's the creating the own blood supply, pro-apoptotic, meaning it induces cell death, and then it has autophagy, right? When we use cannabis to attack cancer cells, those cells clean up after themselves. So you don't have a lot of byproducts or waste from those dead cancer cells. It's very fascinating. But then we have studies that show that chemotherapy or radiation therapy and cannabis together actually work even better together than either one does alone.
Wow.
And, the cannabis inside that body, well, it'll do what it does, what I just described.
Mm-hmm.
But, cannabis also helps people tolerate chemotherapy and radiation therapy better, right? It treats the nausea, it can treat the pain. So the experience that patients are having on chemotherapy or radiation therapy is improved with a cannabis approach. And, that double attack just helps kill that cancer all that much faster.
Wow. So what do you recommend someone, how to use it? I know that there are things you can put in your tea or vape pens. You can eat certain foods. I also want to know, is it okay? Is it even healthy to smoke, roll a joint and smoke?
Yeah. So let's get that one out of the way.
Yeah.
Right off the bat. So when you smoke a blunt or a joint, you are absolutely inhaling carcinogenic particulate matter.
Yeah.
The studies show that there's more carcinogenic material in the smoke of cannabis, joints, blunts, etc., than there is in cigarettes. I don't know how accurate that is. I'm not quite sure. But what I do know is that, yes, byproducts of burning, you're inhaling, yes, it's going to be irritating to the airway. There are carcinogenic particles that you're exposing your airway to. Mm-hmm. And do we see side effects from smoking? Yeah, we do. We can see sore throat. We can appreciate hoarseness, chronic cough, bronchitis. What else? Really inflammation and irritation of that airway. When people stop smoking, though, it heals and gets restored. However, inhaling, you're not going to get a whole lot of medicine. Mm-hmm. You're not. A good percentage of it is going to be re-released when you exhale, or is never gets into your system at all. It's a byproduct. You're exhaling it, or it's just floating away. You're not absorbing the majority of that medicine when you inhale. So when you come into our clinic, we talk about a lot of methods of use, and that depends on a lot of things. Mm-hmm. What is the condition, right? You might have anxiety, or you might have cancer, or anything in between. That's going to determine and dictate a lot of things. So how quickly do we want this product to work? How long do we want it to last, the effect? Yeah. What route of administration does it need to go through? What is the therapeutic blood level? How concentrated do we need this product to be? If you have a cancer, well, then we're talking about high therapeutic blood levels. You're not going to get those therapeutic blood levels through smoking. You're just not. We're going to talk about more concentrated products, like maybe a tincture, or even most concentrated, like an oil, like a fully extracted cannabis oil. And the way you take those are varied, right? We talked about inhaling. Vaporizing is another inhalation method. And we call those pulmonaries, things that you can inhale. Then we have
different, right? Than smoking if you're actually smoking like a joint or something like that, a vape pen is different from that.
It is different. Vape pens typically don't burn your product at the same temperature. So you have a lot less, what would be a good word? A lot less conversion. Mm-hmm. A lot less conversion, and it's obviously it's cleaner. Vaporizing by nature it's filtered. But what we don't know about vaporizing is the long-term side effects of vaporizing, MCT oil or coconut oil or some of the other mediums that a lot of these vape products are carried in, the carrier oils. We don't know. We don't have data for really the history of use, so that we don't know the long-term consequences of that. We scratch our heads and are like, well, when we cook with coconut oil, on the stove or any type of oil, it floats to the surface and then you get buildup, of oil and gunk, on your vent. And it's like, is that happening in the lungs? Like, we don't know.
Yeah.
But I would say it's not without risk, but nothing under the sun is without risk, folks. Nothing under the sun is out there. So we have our pulmonaries, we have our ingestibles, capsules, caplets, tablets, the edibles, or ingestibles, and edibles coming up, variety of candies, lozenges, baked goods, etc. But none of those things I just mentioned are medicine, right? As soon as you put dairy or refined grain or dyes or food colorings in those edibles, they're no longer medicines. Those things are not natural. Those can cause inflammation in the body. What else do we have? We have our topicals that you can rub. A lot of folks with cancer who have radiation burns like using the topicals on their burns to help relieve the pain and help the skin heal faster. We have so that would be transdermals. What am I missing? We have our transmucosals, things that you can absorb in your nasal septum, in the mucous membranes of your mouth, so the buccal mucosa, or sublingually under the tongue, right there. And then we have our suppositories. You can take cannabis via vaginal or rectal suppository. And where you have your cancer matters, right? If you have a breast cancer, you want to get that cannabis as close to that area as is possible. And you can do that by ingesting. You can do that by rubbing a topical. But let's say you have prostate cancer or rectal cancer. Doesn't it make sense to get that cannabis a little bit closer to that target?
Yeah, I never thought about that.
Sure. And so that's a method to get it a lot closer. But suppositories also help us do something else. A lot of people, when we need to get therapeutic blood levels high and also require THC, are afraid of the side effects of THC, right? So THC is the intoxicating or euphorogenic cannabinoid, whereas CBD and THCA, CBDA, and a bunch of the other alphabet cannabinoids are not. However, they are all of them are psychoactive, right? A lot of people out there will say CBD is the non-psychoactive. It is super psychoactive, folks. It treats anxiety, it alters mood, it treats seizures, it works in that brain. They're all psychoactive. But THC is the intoxicating one, right? And so that's the red eye, that's the munchies, that's the cognitive changes, that's the racing heartbeat. It can cause anxiety, increased paranoia. It can cause hallucinations at high levels of intolerance. And we want to avoid those at all costs, especially in folks that do not want to feel those effects. But when we use cannabis as a suppository, it bypasses the metabolic pathway that allows that effect. And so it decreases the amount of side effect THC can give a person when we use a suppository. So suppositories allow us to get therapeutic blood levels up quickly without the same degree of adverse side effects to that THC. So there's a lot of methods of use. When it comes to cancer, typically we are talking about high dose therapies. And because of that, we have to work within patients' tolerability. And also it all depends on what cancer type you have. Tissue samples are important. There are certain cancers that respond better to higher THC, while others respond better to higher CBD, and any other variety of concentration and ratio in between there. The science is here. It does suggest that there's precision that can be applied to using cannabis to really tackle diseases, including cancer. Unfortunately, a quick Google search on how to treat cancer with cannabis is not ubiquitous. It's not a one-size-fits-all model, just like conventional medicine is not.
Yeah.
Right? We can get highly specific with a protocol for a patient with cancer. But we still have years of research and study in the clinical setting to sort of fine-tune and hone in on the true benefits and even the true risks of using cannabis. I think, starting in the 1960s, you've had tens of thousands of studies to date on cannabis, on botany, on the pharmacology of it, on the endocannabinoid system, disease-specific studies, a lot of preclinical stuff, very few clinical trials on humans, but all of those things do exist. Tens of thousands of studies, tens of thousands. And what I always try to tell people, especially healthcare providers who are still, pitching that same old argument, there's no research, or it's too risky, and there's dangers to this and that and them, is out of all those tens of thousands of research studies, not to mention the only studies the National Institute of Drug Abuse were allowed to conduct in the United States for the express purpose to determine the harms of cannabis, we still cannot prove causation of harm with cannabis. We know of 0 deaths due to cannabis use or cannabis overdose, and we cannot say definitively how cannabis is harmful. We can't. So 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, that is 60 years and tens of thousands of trials, and we still have not proven the causative harms of cannabis.
Wow.
Should make you scratch your head, right? Should make you scratch your head.
That is crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, again, not without its harms. If you have cirrhosis, you don't want you taking THC, because THC actually has been proven to speed up the fibrotic scarring, can make cirrhosis worse. So again, there are instances where a doctor would suggest that you not use THC, whereas CBD can help heal cirrhotic liver, right? But you wouldn't know that unless you talk to a cannabis specialist.
Right.
You go to a dispensary, are you telling, like, you go into the dispensary because you want to use cannabis for anxiety? Or like, better yet, let's see, we want to use it for depression, because let's say THC does help with depression. That bud tender or dispensary agent is not going to ask you, do you have cirrhosis? And counsel you to not use THC because of your cirrhosis, right? And that's a problem.
Yeah.
That's a problem. Again,
you need to see a specialist, basically.
Yes, it is not.
Know what effects it's going to have on you. You just think, oh, like, I'm going to go to dispensary and get whatever, and I'll be good.
Yes, it is not without its risks. Or let's just say, gosh, you could have anything under the sun, but you also have anxiety. You might have an anxiety disorder, right? But you're not trying to treat your anxiety with cannabis. You're trying to do something else with it altogether. Well, THC can make you more anxious, especially if you're already anxiety prone. It can tip you into a full-blown panic attack. Mm-hmm. And that could be very detrimental and traumatic to somebody who already has, pre-existing anxiety disorder. But if you don't know those things, you're going to have a negative experience with cannabis, and you may never turn to it again. You may never consider it again. So there's a lot of work that we do in our clinics to sort of reframe expectations and to begin using cannabis in a very pragmatic and broadly safe way that the industry at large doesn't support, right? If you go into a dispensary, they're going to point you maybe to something high in THC, the higher the better, have a good time. Or we had a patient come in and tell us she was like terrified, traumatized, leaving the dispensary because she went in with the intention of buying something for a medical purpose. And on the way out, the agent was like, enjoy that product. And it just, like, she's like, they think I'm a pothead.
Oh my God. Wow. Wow.
So we have some balancing to do between the medicine of cannabis and the industry.
Yeah.
Where you buy your cannabis. We have some balancing to do to make it an overall comprehensive and meaningful process for people. We have work to do.
I'm so glad you said that, because who's thinking that? Like, yeah, you need to find someone who's a specialist in that field that will really help you, not just give you anything.
Yeah.
Wow. It's interesting too how my holistic doctor, she was like, when my doctor had prescribed me these high painkillers because I was in so much pain, she was like, I'd prefer if you actually use cannabis or get a vape pen, because it's really toxic. Those painkillers are really toxic on your liver, and we need to filter everything out and make it, function as best as it could. And I was just like, I never heard that before. But the painkillers weren't even working. So, the vape pen worked. And then I just went to taking Tylenol for a couple of days, and it just went away.
Yeah.
The pain.
Yeah.
I was like,
what? And she's absolutely right. And I really wish we had a conventional system, because again, I'm not in opposition to conventional medicine. Mm-hmm. We do acute care, we do emergent care, we do traumatic care very well. We save lives very well. The problem is we try to maintain life on conventional solutions, prescription drugs, repetitive procedures. We play catch up, not very well. We play reactive medicine not very well in the conventional space. So I would really like to see a bridge between more holistic, natural, classical medicine, lifestyle, and a lifestyle approach to medicine with the conventional medicine.
And I was going to ask you, since you're a doctor and you care for other people all the time, how do you live a full life, and what are some of your self-care tips?
So I'm somebody who, very early on in my residency practice recognized that the conventional system was missing the spiritual health aspect. And if you go back into classical medicine, Ayurveda, ancient Chinese medicine, Native American medicine, the spirit, the mind, and the body are all connected. They're all one. We treat it as a one. We don't subspecialize out physical areas of the body. We don't take the spirit and the mind out of the bigger picture. And when I recognized this and started incorporating conversations about spirituality in the 10, 15 minutes I have with patients, I saw amazing things. And this is within my family medicine practice. I mean, I had people coming back, every three to 4 weeks with the report of reduced anxiety. I was able to lower folks' blood pressure medicines. And I think in the period of time that I started doing that, for my own patients, I made no prescriptions. I made no new prescriptions. I only reduced prescriptions. And I was fascinated. I was just testing it. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't. But my experience, their experience was enriched by it. I actually saw improvement. So I knew there was something that we were missing. And then, so after residency, and when I started reading up on Ayurveda, ancient Chinese medicine, and some natural principles that incorporated the spirit and the mind along with the body, light bulbs all over the place, aha moments all over the place. We have a conventional system that has taken spirituality out of healing. That makes no sense. What is the placebo? The placebo is really, we call it the chance that you'll have an intended outcome without using, like a medicine or prescription drug or something else, right? We give you a placebo. You think you're taking active medicine, you're not, but you believe it's going to work. So there's a percentage of the time that it actually will work. That's not chance. That's not really chance. Yeah. That's the biology of belief, right? Yeah. You believed it would work, and therefore it did. Yeah. The spirituality is huge. You could argue that it's everything. It is.
Right?
Right? And for those of you who think like me, we're spiritual beings in this physical, world. There's power in our spirit. Yeah. Right? There's God power. There's source power. Yeah. I'm also a believer in universal law. I think God is universal law. So when people try to separate God, spirituality from universal law, I'm like, incorrect. It's all the same. Yeah. It's all the same. And we have the power right in here to heal ourselves. But most of us disbelieve that, who really believes we can move the mountain with our mind? I think humans doubt, right? We inevitably doubt. Therefore, none of us are out here move mountains with our faith.
One of my favorite scriptures.
but we should be able to, right? We should. We could muster up enough belief and faith that we can, we will. I do believe that. But I see it left and right. I see when I have people who don't believe they're going to get better, guess what? They don't. Even with changing their diet, even with behaviors that promote health and healing, if they doubt, they don't get as well. Yeah. So bringing it back to what do I do? Attempting to regularly incorporate yoga into my week, reading scripture every day, making sure that in my immediate circles, that the people that I put in my inner circle are people who are enriching and support me and elevate me and allow me to do the same for them. I've learned that you have to get rid of people who bring you down. That doesn't mean you don't have to ignore them, especially if they're related to you. They're just not in your inner circle. They don't need to know everything about you. Yeah. And you don't need to know everything about them, right? So learning what's most important to you, what gives you the most life, the most energy, the most love, it's very important you start there. Do what you can within your capacity to live as healthy and well as possible. Just that will make an extreme amount of difference. And if you're a spiritual person, God will reward you for taking care of this vessel that he's entrusted you with. I firmly believe that.
Wow. Yes, I agree. Well, I guess we can end it with that. Oh my God. Thank you so much for
You're welcome.
joining us
Fun.
today.